Hello everybody, welcome once again. We're here on day 11 for Inktober, and day 11's prize is going to be the word snow. Now I can't really think of two. I've got two things I would wanted to draw, look around and see what I could what the word snow brings up, and it generally brings up like a scene of snow, or it brings up the abominable snowman. So because I like to draw myself a character and so on, I think I'm gonna have a go at drawing an abominable snowman, not the one from the well, maybe something close to the not the new Disney film, but you remember that abominable snowman in Monsters? I think Monsters. No, yeah, Monsters Inc. Something similar to that one. I'm gonna make him a little bit more try and make him as more like original character, but you can't really do anything different to an abominable snowman. Make him fluffy and make him have big eyes and such. Make him look vicious. I'm not really going to do, but I am going to try and make him be standing in a scene of sorts with a few trees and stuff. I was going to just do a scene of trees, but I thought that would be very difficult as I'm not used to drawing just scenes. So I'm going to try and draw a character as always, and then I'll have a snowy scene around him and things like that. But yeah, we're on day 11 for Inktober. If you want to say hi in the chat, you can do. We are live right now, but if you're watching back, you still can leave a comment. Otherwise, my name's Blut084, BLUT084, Art and Games. And this was day 1 for Ring. This was day 2 for Mindless. This was day 3 for Baked. I'm going to say fish, but it's baked. We've got day 4 for Freeze. We've got day 5, and that was Build, and you can see this one actually in person if you go over to the Mixer streams, or if you want to catch up, they are available on my channel to check out. That is Minecraft. And then day 6 was Husky. We've got a scene, Do Not Feed the Animals. I had a bit of problem with that one. Check out the video for that. This one here was and still isn't available to watch unless you're watching live. Then well done, you're actually one of the first, one of the few that's actually been able to watch me bring this one to life. That was for the word I think now enhanced. Yeah, so yeah, that was that day. And this is for day 8, which was Frail, like a witch, maybe an old granny. Yeah, this is one of my actual favorite one. I've been wanting to draw that for many years. As a kid, I've read the comic, and I was like, wow, I wish I could draw that. And I had a go on day 9, which was for Swing. Yesterday I relaxed and just kicked back a little bit, and didn't really use any reference, didn't want to use anything, just wanted to get on and do some patterns, and that's what we did yesterday. We did a few simple patterns. If you want to check it out and listen to the audiobook we were listening to, that is available to watch on my channel, unless it's been blocked, but I don't think it has. I haven't seen any pop-ups to say you can't listen to that. We can't playlist or whatever. We will be listening to another audiobook while I draw today, because I'm trying to put detail in, and I'm using only an ink pen. Well, not one ink pen, but many different ones. That is my favorite pen there. That is my Uniball 7.0 thickness. I'm thinking of possibly getting some more next week, but more likely just carry on using these ones. And when I start bigger projects again, I'll get some more different things, because this is like an hour a day. I do about an hour's drawing, unless it's a big scene and I really want to put loads of detail in, then it'll be like 2 hours. But an hour is generally how long I'll go for. And that's how long I'll be planning to go for today. Again, guys, if you want to check any of these pictures out, there are in playlists for Inktober. But if you want to see anything out by me when I do some drawings, because my book from last year is completely finished, so you guys can check that one out. This one should be 31 days, but there's like 55 pages in this one altogether. I couldn't find one with just 30 odd pages, so this one's got 50 odd. So when I've finished Inktober, what I'll do is I'll start something else. Not sure, I might go back to what I was designing on design something in polymer clay. No, sorry, design something on here, make it in polymer clay, and then make it in VR, because I want to get back to doing some VR work. view because I don't feel confident in the app, so I want to kind of spend more and more time on it. I'll spend about an hour. I reckon next month I'll spend about an hour doing a thing, and then maybe I'll do it each day, and we'll see if we can make a scene or a thing or a person or something like that. But anyway, that's next month. This is this month, and again, the prompt is snow. We're going to be listening to another audiobook. Hopefully, this one doesn't give me any copyright. It isn't as big as most of the others, but we're going to be listening to The Abominable Snowman. Again, guys, if you want to leave a comment, you can do. If I don't see him straight away, I do apologize. Stick around till I see that picture. Till I see that comment, like I did yesterday, and yeah, I'll join in. You join in.
Of The Abominable Snowman by Nicholas Blake, read by Chris Dyer. Chapter 1. Oh, that I were a mockery king of snow. Shakespeare. The great frost of 1940 was over. The great thaw had set in. For nearly 2 months, the flat lands around Easterham Manor had been lying under a monotony of snow, which, like an enchanter, turned even the most familiar landmarks into strange and silenced shapes. Gazing out from behind the blurred panes of the nursery window, John and Priscilla Restorick could see Easterham village a mile away, gradually emerging from its snow-white trance. In this country of level fields and winding, hedgeless roads, there had been little else but the villages to arrest the steady flow of the blizzards. Easterham had been half obliterated by drifts. As often as men had dug passages through its one street and their own backyards, the snow had come to fill them up again. Today, Easterham resembled a series of half-finished excavations in a white desert. The snow, sliding off its red-tiled roofs and melting to a yellowish slush where the inhabitants walked, pattering down from the vicarage elms, wearing threadbare on the allotments, was beginning to reveal the outline of the village the children knew. But John and Priscilla had little attention to spare for the village. They were staring with all the intense absorption of their age at the snowman on the lawn, just beneath their window. Queen Victoria is being liquidated, murmured John, who had a knack for picking up well-worn words from his elders and minting them afresh. He used this word sotto voce, knowing that his father did not at all approve of it. It was, no doubt, like strumpet and bloody, one of those words which were all right for Shakespeare and grown-ups to use, but did not do for children. At any rate, Will Dykes, their mother's friend, who was staying in the house, had used it at lunch one day, and their father had closed his eyes slowly in the gesture of rebuke so painfully familiar to John, and put on a shocked, not before the children expression. Queen Victoria is being liquidated, John murmured, again savouring the word pleasantly on his tongue, and watching another patch of snow slide off the disintegrating widow. Queen Victoria is being decontaminated, exclaimed Priscilla, not to be outdone. She rubbed the misty mark on the window where her snub nose had pressed. You're a fool, said John amiably. Decontaminated is what they do when you're covered with mustard gas, or else you come out with bloody great blisters and they go pop. You shouldn't use that word. I don't care. Anyway, Aunt Betty was always using it. She was grown up. Besides, she's dead. I don't see that makes any difference. I say, Mouse, don't you think it was awfully queer about Aunt Betty? Queer? What do you mean, Rat? Well, having policemen here and the whole household whizzing about like mad. They didn't whiz. They all sat around looking as if they were waiting for a train. Yes, Priscilla elaborated. It was like when we're going off for the summer holidays. Everyone keeps sitting down and then standing up and rushing off somewhere, and they're too busy to play with us, and you never know if they're going to be extra decent to you or snap your head off. But you don't have policemen whizzing around when you're going off for the holidays. I like Mr. Strangeways. He's my best policeman. He isn't a policeman, you spotted pard. He's a private impersonator. What's that?
It's a private impersonator. It does private impersonations
it's-
for you.
A private impersonator, like Sherlock Holmes. He puts on a false beard and tracks the criminal to his lair when the police are baffled. Why can't you track the criminal to his lair without putting on a beard? I don't like beards. Dr. Bogan tickles when he kisses me. Don't be an ass. He puts on a false beard. Oh, well, it's one of the things you'll understand when you're older. I've never seen Mr. Strangeways in a false beard. And anyway, I'm as old as you, twin rat. You were born 10 minutes after me. Women are always older for their years than men. Everyone knows that. Oh, tripe and onions. You're not a woman. You're an infant child. Don't copy Miss Ainsley. She's a stuck-up vampire. She's not. She helped Uncle Andrew and us to build the snowman. She is. She's got bloody fingernails and sharp white teeth. They're better to eat you with. Aunt Betty used to do her fingernails red, and her toenails. I saw them that night she came in. What night? Asked Priscilla. The night she died and went to heaven. She came in and looked at me, and then she went out again. She thought I was asleep. Her face was white as death. I could see her in the moonlight. She looked all frozen, like a snowman. I expect it was her ghost. Don't be an ass, said John, a shade less robustly. How could she be a ghost when she wasn't dead? Well, it wouldn't be the first time a ghost had walked in this mouldering mansion. I say, what are you dribbling about? It's a secret. I heard Daddy and Mr. Strangeways. Shh, someone's coming. Hereward Restorick entered the nursery. The twins' father had retired army and country gentleman written all over him. His flaxen, drooping moustache, worn rather longer than the cavalry fashion, reminded one of his Saxon ancestry. The Restoricks of Easterham are older than Doomsday Book. Hereward glanced round the nursery with a preoccupied eye. He had the look of an officer inspecting his men with something else on his mind. Whatever's all this? He asked, indicating a conglomeration of toys and games on the floor. John stuck out his underlip as if bracing himself for trouble. But Priscilla was not at all dismayed. She tossed back her dark curls in a winning, independent gesture caught from her American mother and said, We're tidying out the toy cupboard, Daddy. Tidying? Oh, well, John can finish that. It's time for your music lesson, Moppet. The deep-lying snow and quarantine for measles had kept the children away from school this term, and their parents had been giving them occasional lessons. Hereward Restorick, rather surprisingly to those who saw in him the very type of the outdoor sportsman, possessed a talent for the piano. Priscilla, running to him, took his hand and dragged him excitedly towards the door. As they were going out, he glanced back at his son, who was now staring out of the window again. Get on with it, old man, he said, not unkindly, but with an undertone of suppressed impatience in his voice that made the boy stiffen a little. Tidy it up. You can't stay mooning there all the morning. We were watching the snowman melt. Well, that's all right. He'll be there still when you've tidied up. That air gun of yours isn't loaded, is it? Are you sure? Uncle Andrew said I could shoot at birds out of the window when he gave it to me. I asked you, was it loaded, son? I have to keep it ready in case I suddenly see a bird, and I've told you before, John, never to keep a gun loaded, haven't I? You're 10 years old, and it's time you learned sense about firearms. Very well, let me see you take the shot out now before you forget. John did as he was told. He was a fearless child, but he knew better than to provoke the raging, terrifying temper which any insubordination aroused in his father. Instinctively, he realized that, though his father was normally a patient and kindly man, this temper was a hair-trigger affair which the lightest touch would explode. And, lately, there was no doubt of it, his father had been somehow different. It was all a part of the changed atmosphere in the house since Aunt Betty died, part of a bewildering picture which, for John, included also his absence from school, the coming and go of policemen, the burst pipes, the snowman, the hushed conversations of grown-ups which were apt to break off abruptly when he or Priscilla entered the room. The general unsettlement of a household that normally ran as smoothly as an 8-cylinder engine. Putting the air gun away in a corner, John returned to the window. He opened it and leaned out. Everywhere, the thaw was perceptible. The snow flaking off the evergreens behind the tennis court, in the dank, mild air that brushed his face so softly, and, most of all, in the tinkling water music made by the running gutters, the stream tumbling over its miniature waterfall at the bottom of the rock garden, the whole melting landscape beyond. Only the snowman seemed to resist this universal dissolution.
So just drew a bloody
Its surface
snowman now.
was beginning to look popped and granulated.
Well, we'll sort it out.
Its lumpish figure still
Sure of it.
retained
Well, we've
something
seen to.
of the contour given to it by its creators. And the snow, already trodden hard by many feet, reminded John of its fashioning and his dream. He remembered that afternoon several weeks ago when Uncle Andrew, Mr. Strangeways, Priscilla, and himself had built it. Miss Ainsley was there
No, I
too,
don't like this story.
wearing scarlet woolen gloves and furry snow boots, making a lot of silly, queer remarks he didn't understand.
I'll have to save it with the scene behind
She
it,
was
eh?
the sort of woman who sat about, making remarks. She had even brought out a kitchen chair to sit on, but Uncle Andrew soon tipped her off that and rolled her in the snow, and Miss Ainsley had laughed a lot and been quite sporting about it, though John fancied she didn't really enjoy it as much as she pretended. Then Uncle Andrew took the chair for the snowman to sit on. He said it was a throne, and the snowman would be Queen Victoria, and Miss Ainsley said something vulgar about the good queen getting piles if she sat out in the cold. The children rolled up great balls of the clinging snow, which Uncle Andrew lifted into position and scraped and prodded till he had produced a figure really just like the Queen in John's history book. Then they stuck halfpennies in the face for eyes, and Miss Ainsley found an old widow's bonnet and veil in the acting cupboard to place on its head. But, for some reason, Daddy didn't approve of that part of it when he came out to look, and they had to put the bonnet back again. As he gazed down at the snowman now, John felt a queer sort of exultation. It was as though he were God, looking down from heaven and commanding the snowman to melt. One of the halfpennies dropped silently out of an eye socket. "It is the Lord's doing, and wonderful in our eyes," John muttered dreamily. He willed a crack to appear on its head, and presently, sure enough, the crack did appear. "Look, Mouse, Queen Victoria is cracked," he exclaimed, forgetting that his sister was not in the room. Once again, he remembered his dream. It was over a week ago, but still extraordinarily vivid to him. He had dreamt that he woke up in the middle of the night and went to the window. It was a moonless night, but bright with stars. A few miles away, the serried searchlights of the outer defences stood straight up into the sky, a palisade of light. On the lawn below, he could just see the glimmering, stocky outline of the snowman. But, in his dream, it kept appearing and disappearing, as though, he thought, next morning, someone was passing to and fro in front of it. It was almost as if someone were building another snowman. But the next morning, Queen Victoria was still there, without a consort, a little bulkier and more ragged, perhaps, for snow had fallen in the night, but still recognizably the same figure of majesty. He had not mentioned this dream to anyone but Priscilla, and in the excitement of getting an air gun from Uncle Andrew, it had been temporarily forgotten. But this morning, when there were no plump, feather-ruffled birds on the lawn to pot at, for the thaw had sent them back to their normal winter ways, John seemed, for a moment, to be living in the dream again. It was odd, he reflected vaguely, that he had not been at all frightened by it, only interested, and, in a remote way, excited, as though part of himself had been down on the lawn, while part watched from the window. The sound of Priscilla playing the piano in the drawing room below now stopped. Everything was silent, except for the musical shush and tinkle of thawing snow. John's pony in the paddock away to the right suddenly kicked up its heels and galloped to the hedge, sending up snow like spindrift. Priscilla was running up the stairs. Mummy appeared in Wellington's talking to the gardener. John remembered there was something he wanted to ask Priscilla. "I say," he called when she entered the nursery, "what was all that bilge about a ghost?" "Bilge yourself. I heard them talking about it." "Well, Scribbles saw the ghost anyway," Mummy said. "Cats don't see ghosts." "Scribbles is a very wise cat." "Scribbles is a naughty old stinkerado." "Saw it where, anyway?" "In the bishop's room. That's all I heard. They dried up when they saw I was there listening." "Oh, yes. And someone said it was funny the way Scribbles kept bouncing off the walls." "Bouncing off? Oh, you're crackers. I say, Mouse, come and look at Queen Victoria. She's cracked too." The children, side by side, leaned out of the window. As they watched, the crack at the top of the snowman's head deepened. A segment of snow slid smoothly as a camera shutter off its face. Its face ought to have gone, but it was still there. The squat, shapeless snowman still had a face almost as white as the snow which had covered it. The dead, human face of someone who shouldn't have been there at all. John and Priscilla gave each other one frozen, terrified glance. Then they raced for the door and went pelting downstairs. "Daddy! Daddy!" John yelled. "Come quick! There's someone inside the snowman! It's..." Chapter 2. Ingenuous fancy, never better pleased than when employed to accommodate the fair. Cooper. Nigel Strangeways' introduction to the macabre and tragic events which he later named The Case of the Abominable Snowman came several weeks before the snowman revealed its secret, in the shape of a letter to his wife Georgia. She handed it to him across the breakfast table in their Devonshire cottage, grinning with amusement. The letter was written on thick cream paper, headed The Dower House, Easterham, Essex, and written in a script of peculiar character and delicacy. Nigel began to read it aloud. "Dear Cousin Georgia, it would give an old woman much pleasure if you and your husband were to do her the honour of visiting her. I live, as you know, not much in the world, and it would be vastly agreeable to me to have your company for a week. Could you engage yourselves to make the journey in such desperate times? I am not insensible of the inconvenience to which my request may put you, but, leaving aside the gratification your visit would cause me, I have a little problem which I take leave to suggest your husband, whose fame has reached even to my rural seclusion, would find intriguing. The problem, to be brief, concerns a cat." "Oh, but really now," Nigel protested, "I can't trip over to Essex to find a missing cat." "Go on. There's more to the cat than that." "A cat," resumed Nigel, "belonging to Hereward Restorick of Easterham Manor. I am not, I hope, fantastic in declaring that there was more, to use a cant phrase, than meets the eye in this cat's behaviour. Unpredictable as our raised tribe, we may yet have cause to expect when such a creature generates universal alarm by transforming itself into a delirious dervish. Though in the autumn of my years I conceive I am not yet so much deprived of wit that I should attribute to the supernatural what may surely be resolved by reason. Should the ingenious Mr. Strangeways lend his counsel to my own poor observations, he would, I make no doubt, bring lux itenebris, and in so doing ease the curiosity, nay, the worst apprehensions of your obliged cousin, Clarissa Cavendish. When Nigel had got his breath back after the perusal of this extraordinary missive, he remarked to Georgia, "Well, really, you do have the most eccentric relatives. Who is this 18th century fantastic?" "I've not seen her for years, not since she went to live at Eastham. Some great uncle of mine left her a fair packet of money, and she bought the Dower House, so they tried to clap her into a bin." "Darling Georgia, please don't talk shorthand at this hour of the morning. Why should they clap her into a bin for buying a Dower House? And who are they?" "The cousins who thought they should have got the legacy, of course. And it wasn't because she bought the house, but because she acted so strange after buying it." "As, for instance?" "Oh, you'll see all that when we've got there. Now, Georgia, please, the ingenuous Mr. Strangeways is not going all the way to Essex in wartime to stay with an aged lunatic and investigate a cat which transforms itself into a delirious dervish." "He is, and she isn't. What I remember of her, she was remarkably sane, and altogether charming. If she prefers to live in the reign of George III rather than Queen Victoria's, like most old ladies, that doesn't mean she's soft in the head." So, it was settled. A few days later, they arrived at Chelmsford, where...
Okay, I'm starting to like this drawing again.
In a stately telegraph, a conveyance could be chartered to carry
How about
them
you?
the
Let me know in
last
chat.
stage of their journey. They had not.
How badly
however,
am I
bargained
doing today?
for the severity of the weather in this part of the country, though in Devonshire it had been harsh enough. An icy east wind flailed at them as they emerged from the station. Snow was piled everywhere under the pewter-coloured sky. All life seemed at a standstill. "Brrr," muttered Nigel. "So we're to be frozen alive at the start of this wild cat chase. Let's go home again." Even Georgia, whose experience as an explorer might have inured her to such rigours, felt a qualm of regret for their warm, thatched cottage in the southwest. However, they found a taxi driver willing to brave the perils of the Easterham Road and set forth. The 10-mile journey took over an hour by the time they had dug themselves out of a couple of drifts and narrowly escaped sliding into a river at a right-angled turn. When, finally, they reached Easterham, it was almost dusk. The Dower House overlooked what must have been the village green, though the ubiquitous snow had obliterated all such features. It could not, however, entirely efface the charm of Miss Cavendish's home, a red brick building whose symmetry of window and chimney, sharply pitched roof and snug dormers, portico, fanlight, and wrought iron gate, muffled up as they were with snow, still retained, like an elegant woman, heavily furred, the essential assurance of beauty. "What did I tell you?" whispered Georgia. "Nobody could live in a perfect house like this and keep their insanity." Nigel was doubtful of the logic of this remark, but his brain, numbed by the cold, had room for only one thought: how huge a house this was to accommodate so tiny a woman. For Clarissa Cavendish, who received them in the hall, was a mannequin, a mere wisp and miniature of a woman as delicate in filigree as a snowflake, with white hair piled high on her head, and a complexion that was a triumph, whether of art or nature, Nigel could not be sure. "It is vastly horrid, this snow, is it not?" she remarked in a crisp, tinkling voice, all of a piece with her appearance. "You must be fatigued after your journey. I will show you your room. Then we will take a dish of tea, Georgia. Mr. Strangeways will, no doubt, prefer clary." Nigel protested that he did not drink claret at 4:30 in the afternoon. "The bottle will serve for dinner, then," said Miss Cavendish, a reply whose significance Nigel was soon to realise. After tea, their hostess offered to show them over her house. Nigel, already fascinated by the many beautiful pieces he noticed around them in the drawing-room, the Hepplewhite chairs, a Bartolozzi engraving, a set of miniatures by Cosway, a side table bearing several superb examples of Battersea enamel, a cabinet filled with fans, toys, snuff boxes, and knickknacks of elaborate craftsmanship, the silk hangings, and the Adam fireplace, accepted eagerly. It was certainly a big house, bigger even than he had imagined, Miss Cavendish, a tiny figure, erect as a ramrod, went in front, leading them from room to room. Each room had the lovely proportions of its age. Even the electric lights, which Miss Cavendish switched on with a cavalier disregard for the blackout, making the crystal chandeliers sparkle like frozen cascades, did not destroy the illusion of another age. The doors were mahogany, the walls washed in delicate tints of green, yellow, blue, and dove grey. Lovely. Nigel kept repeating mechanically, a perfect room. He kept pinching himself, too, to make sure that he was not dreaming. Georgia he did not dare to glance at, for every single room they entered, with the exception of the drawing room, a small morning room, Miss Cavendish's, and their own bedrooms, was stark staring empty. Not a single piece of furniture, not a curtain or a carpet adorned their exquisite symmetry. When they had returned to the drawing room, Nigel cast about vainly for some comment which would do justice to the situation and no violence to Miss Cavendish's sensibilities. Georgia, however, with her customary directness, went straight to the point. "Why do you keep all those rooms empty, Cousin Clarissa?" she asked. "Because I cannot afford to furnish them in the style they demand, my dear," was the reasonable reply. "I had rather live in the part of a beautiful house than in the whole of an ugly one. You will allow that an old woman has a right to her fancies." "I call it very sensible," said Nigel.
Don't open a room if it's not
You can
a very
expand or contract
decorative
within it
room.
according to
Use
the
that room as a
fluctuation
VR
of your
room.
income. "Mr. Strangeways," announced Clarissa Cavendish, "I perceive we are going to understand each other." "You could put a grand piano in each of those rooms and have 10 pianists down to stay and play them all together.
Pretty sure he said
The
penis
residence
then,
would
but
be
he didn't.
remarkable with those high ceilings," said Georgia dreamily. "I nauseate the piano. It is an instrument fit only for tradesmen's daughters to practice upon. The spinet is very well, the harpsichord will do, but the piano I believe to be a vulgar, pretentious noise. I am surprised at Restorick for playing it." "Restorick?" "Hereward Restorick owns Eastern Manor. It has been in his family for a tolerable time now. It was they who built the Dower House." "Oh, yes," said Nigel. "He's the chap whose cat has brought us together, isn't he?"
Yes,
Tell us
he
about
did
it,
that.
Miss
It's but a
Cavendish.
cat. It's brought us together, isn't he? Yes,
It
yes,
is
it's right.
a story
Yes.
which must
Of
wait
course.
upon good digestion. I am an old woman and not to be rushed.
No, don't
In
wish
their
to be
bedroom,
rushed.
2 hours later, dressed for dinner, Georgia said to Nigel, "I hope I've not done wrong dragging you down here. Darling, I wouldn't have missed it for anything. But what made her like this?" "It's all coming back to me. Clarissa was one of the first blue stockings, a don at Girton, I think. She made her name as an historian. The 18th century was her period, and she just soaked in it. Then she had a complete nervous breakdown, overwork, and I believe there was an unhappy love affair. When she recovered, a part of her had got permanently stuck in the Georgian age. Of course, she had to give up her position, and she had a hardish time teaching as a governess till the legacy came along." A faint, fragile chime, like the notes of a musical box, came up the stairs. Georgia and Nigel went down for dinner. The white-panelled morning room set off their hostess's grace and brilliant complexion. Her eyes sparkled with sedate pleasure. Nigel was touched, seeing in this old woman the intelligence, the gay independence of the girl she had once been. To think of her as a governess at the mercy of brusque or patronizing employers gave one a really sickening qualm. A village woman, looking oddly fancy-dressed in her mob cap and short muslin apron, waited upon them. The food was excellent, though the helpings were fined down to Miss Cavendish's physique, a slip of sole, a tiny round of tornadoes, and wafer-thin fritters. "We must celebrate your first night here," said their hostess. "Annie, the bottle of claret." It was, quite evidently, the one and only bottle of claret in her cellar. But It proved to be an excellent Chateau Béchavel, and Nigel complimented her upon it. "It is a wine Harry was most partial to, I remember," said Clarissa Cavendish. A faint twinge of some emotion, to which Nigel could not put a name, showed on her enamelled face. "You will forgive me," she went on, "if I drink champagne."
Well, I've completely gone off what I was going to do. I mean, I've done the
champagne.
Abominable Snowman. Instead of like doing the scene behind with a load of trees, I thought that was going to take me a lot of time. It's going to take a lot of focus I don't have today. I'm feeling absolutely like donkey poo. So, hopefully this is a good enough drawing for you today. I've done Abominable Snowman, making a snowman. It's not quite finished because he's wearing the hat and the scarf in his hand, and his arms for the snowman are in his arms himself. But I was going to put a sun there or a moon or something like that, but I thought, no, he's outside. So how's the sun in the inside? So I'm kind of like thinking he's the sun of the adult snowman in here, sort of peeking out, going, sort of looking at, oh, he's having fun, or what are you doing out there? Sort of idea. What do you think of that idea, guys? That was the last minute thing I did there, so it was sort of not finished. I still want to put a little bit more in, but there isn't much I need to, I don't think.
Chapter 3. A harmless, necessary fact.
In fact, I'm going to get another pen, start shading, I think.
There are more things in heaven and earth. Come, sir.
I think a little bit of shade here and there is going to help the picture.
On her side table.
And guess what pen I'm going to be using?
Evaded by quotations. Nigel tried again. "Well, then, I believe we do not yet fully comprehend the laws of nature. That nature even makes exceptions to its own laws.
No.
But that it is our duty to look for rational explanations of all phenomena." "That is better. I conclude, then, that if you were to see a cat attempting to batter its brains out against a wall, you would not, in the first place, assume it to be possessed by a devil, or attacking some ghostly apparition visible only to its own eyes. You would rather suppose it be rendered frenetic by some internal disorder." "Cat's rabies," suggested Georgia, flippantly. "Yes," said Nigel, "the creature must have fits, or else it was in agonizing pain." "Scribbles never has fits," said Miss Cavendish, severely. "And a few minutes after its droll display, it was fast asleep." "I think you had better start at the beginning," Nigel said.
Yes, start.
The old lady, drawing herself even more upright, composed her fingers in her lap. Every now and then they made little gestures as though toying with a fan. For the rest, nothing of her moved during her strange narrative except the mouth and the dark brown, scintillating eyes. "My story opens on the 4th day before Christmas. I was taking tea with Charlotte Restorick, Hereward's wife. She is an American." Nigel was convinced that Miss Cavendish had been on the point of saying a colonist. "But I find her civil enough, and she is generally accounted a handsome sort of female. Lord knows why she married Restorick. He's a poor thing, all moustache and decorum. The Restoricks are sadly inbred, of course. Presently, the house party assembling, the conversation turned on the subject of ghosts. There is a room at the manor called the Bishop's Room, which is reputed to be haunted, and Elizabeth Restorick proposed that we should assemble there one night, and, as she expressed it, beat up the bish." "Elizabeth Restorick?" asked Nigel. "Who is she?" "She is a trollop," rejoined Miss Cavendish.
"She is a trollop!"
"Hereward's sister, but a great deal younger than he, and shocking forward chit. If Hereward inherited the Restorick fortune, Elizabeth inherited its vice. She was educated in America, to be sure, so we must not judge her too harshly. You are to know that Harold Restorick, Hereward's father, was attached to the embassy in Washington, and being as he was to live there for some years, he was under the necessity of taking his family out to America, so that the children only received what rudimentary education the country can furnish. A sad pity. For Elizabeth and Andrew both had talent. Andrew, that's another brother, is it? Yes, he was Harry's favourite son, though Hereward, of course, was the heir. Andrew, alas, disappointed his father. He turned out a rolling stone, a lover of low company. He's a vastly handsome lad, though, and there is no real vice in him, unless it is a vice not to abide his brother's sermons. He and Elizabeth have always been great cronies. Was he in the house party at Christmas too? He was. The company was made up by Elizabeth's latest conquest, a Mr. Dykes, a tedious, ill-bred person, a writer of romances, and Miss Ainsley, a nondescript sort of fribble. Oh yes, and I'm forgetting Dr. Bogan. Dr. Bogan is, I apprehend, a quack.
Seems to have been a queerly assorted house party to find under so conventional a roof, Georgia commented. A trollop, an Anglo-Saxon squire, an American wife, a rolling stone, a fribble, and a quack.
Clarissa Cavendish inclined her head. Her fingers fluttered and composed themselves again in her lap. Harry would not have countenanced it, but Hereward has no backbone. If Charlotte wishes to invite a person, then it is to be so. She is a snob, poor girl, and believes every freak duckling a swan. Well then, we fixed to assemble in the bishop's room on the night of Christmas Eve.
What were you expected to see? Nigel interrupted.
It is a foolish, idle tale. The Bishop of Eastchester was staying at the manor in 1609. One morning he was found dead in that room. Some ill-conditioned persons alleged he had been poisoned by his host, and there was a scandal put about. But the Restorick of that time affirmed that the bishop, who was notoriously a gross liver, had taken a surfeit of venison the night before, and died of it. I make no doubt this was the truth.
Hey guys, I'm making a snowman. You like my snowman? What you doing after, honey?
Are heard by night.
I'm making a snowman, Mommy.
And the bishop has appeared to the credulous in a cambric nightgown, clutching his belly and
Stop staring at me.
mightily.
It sounds a rather frivolous ghost story to me.
At half an hour before midnight on Christmas Eve, we all repaired to the bishop's room. It is a horrid, cold room, used now as a little library, and Charlotte Restorick brewed a bowl of punch to warm our vitals. A great deal of wine had been drank at dinner, so, what with this and the punch, Elizabeth and Miss Ainsley were getting quite tipsy. I recall that Restorick rebuked Betty sitting in Mr. Dykes's lap, and she retorted that the bishop had done worse than that in his day. Her pertness started a very strange, vulgar scene. She is strangely violent at times, a positive virago, but what a beauty. Well, at the worst of the quarrel, though indeed the quarrel was all Elizabeth, and Restorick only trying to quieten her, the clock struck 12. Andrew Restorick said, "Pipe down, Betty, or the bishop will cancel his visitation." After that, she was quiet. His words seemed to sober the rest of the company too. We were sitting in a row of chairs along the wall opposite the fireplace. Someone suddenly said, "Look at Scribbles." Clarissa Cavendish paused effectively. In the silence, Georgia and Nigel could hear the howl of the east wind tearing past the house. Miss Cavendish shivered a little so that her necklace made a sound like a faint tinkling of icicles, and resumed her story. The cat had been lapping a saucer of milk which had been brought in for her. She was now purring aloud, a mightily harsh, disagreeable sound, as if the creature was a rusty clockwork and someone winding it up. Then she walked into the middle of the room, her legs strangely rigid, arching her back and still making that infernal purring. We were all struck dumb with amazement. Scribbles held the floor. She was crouching now, like a tiger, kneading the carpet with her paws, glaring into the far corner of the room. On a sudden, she sprang at this corner. I wish I might not have seen it. She sprang and struck the wall with her head and rebounded like an India rubber ball. This queer behavior she repeated 3 or 4 times with every circumstance of ferocity, flinging herself against the bare walls or the bookcases till we had thought she must dash out her brains against them. The party was vastly discomposed at the spectacle. One of the females, Miss Ainsley, I fancy, began to sob and caterwaul, shrieking that the cat was seeing some horror invisible to us. "And what did you think?" asked Nigel sharply. I thought the cat was not frightened, but enjoying her hunt. For some reason, this comment, delivered in Miss Cavendish's light, crisp voice, froze Georgia's blood. After some while, the old lady resumed, Scribbles seemed to tire of these odd adults. She prowled back to the center of the room, suddenly commenced to chase her tail, and went whirling round like a mad dervish or a teetotum, then curled herself up in front of the whole company and fell asleep. There was a long silence. Nigel was staring down his nose, unwilling to meet the old lady's eyes. Georgia fidgeted with her cigarette holder, for once at a loss for words. "Why have you told us about this?" said Nigel at last, looking up. Clarissa Cavendish's scintillating eyes held his. There was an excitement in them he could not fathom. They seemed to expect something from her, as though she were a teacher who could hardly restrain herself from prompting a pupil towards the correct answer. She said, "First, Mr. Strangeways, what is your own opinion of the incident?" "Either the cat was seeing a ghost, or she wasn't. If it had been a ghost, she'd have been frightened, arched her back, spat, but surely not have delivered a series of assaults. Besides, we are agreed to shelve the supernatural until we are sure no rational explanation can be found. The violence of the animal's behavior. How old is she, by the way?" 3 years old, said Clarissa. "Precludes us from attributing it to mere kittenishness. Suppose she was drugged. You say she'd been given a saucer of milk. I don't know what poison would produce such symptoms without leaving more severe after effects, but suppose someone doped the milk or gave her an injection before your seance began. Why should he do it? To frighten the party seems the only possible answer. A practical joke. Or to frighten one of the party seriously." "Sounds to me rather elaborate and cruel for an ordinary practical joke," said Georgia. "If the joker had dressed up in a cambric nightdress and clutched his belly and groaned, but the phantom bishop seems to have got left on the sidelines. Miss Cavendish nodded vigorously and gave the arm of her chair a little applauding pat. If the joke was a more serious one, resumed Nigel, aimed at some particular member of the party, it must mean that there was something about the cat's behavior which would be understood by the victim and frighten him more than the others. Was anyone especially upset apart from Miss Ainsley? You are familiar with the play Hamlet, Mr. Strangeways? Nigel admitted it. You recollect the play within the play, how the king watched the players and Hamlet watched the king. On Christmas Eve, we were not all engaged with the antics of the cat. I chanced to look aside and noticed Andrew Restorick gazing fixedly at another member of the party. Which one? That I cannot tell you. The chairs were arranged in an arc. Andrew was sitting on the extreme left and gazing at some one of those at the other end. It might have been his sister Elizabeth, or Dr. Bogan, or Mr. Dykes. You were not altogether engrossed in the play yourself, then, Miss Cavendish? La, sir,
Trying
you are
to
very
show an inside to it,
pertinacious,
give it a
she
different
exclaimed,
pattern, but
with
it's
a
similar, very
coquetry
similar.
that did not quite conceal a
Distance
certain
tends
discomfiture.
to bring
I
things
have
closer.
My
or smaller.
understanding still, I hope. I may be allowed to use my eyes. And did any of those three appear particularly upset? I cannot pretend so. Betty looked dumpish. I thought she was too tipsy for alarm. Mr. Dykes seemed to be swearing to himself. Dr. Bogan maintained an air of reserve. I saw him and Betty with their heads together afterwards, though. Have there been any repercussions since? Miss Cavendish gazed at him blankly, as though the word did not come into her vocabulary. You spoke in your letter of being apprehensive, Nigel persisted. Are you afraid there's more to it than a cat's hallucinations? Was that only a beginning? The old lady seemed strangely unwilling to speak. Her eyes, unfocused now, stared vaguely and painfully in front of her. She looked lost. At last, rising from her chair, leaning heavily upon her tasseled ivory stick, she moved across.
And I put little bits of colour in just to show the difference between bits and bobs. I know it probably doesn't need it, but I just felt like it needed a little bit of colour. Just a tinge.
Yes, I am afraid. There is something rotten in that house. I cannot put my finger upon it, but I know it is so. I have, her voice faltered slightly. I have special reasons for being interested in the family, in Elizabeth and Andrew particularly. My reasons are of no consequence, I beg leave to say.
Kinda looks evil now.
This I can tell you, that I had rather face the devil and all his angels than the influence, whatever it may be, which is at work in Easterham Manor. I understand, said Nigel gently. You wish me to... Clarissa Cavendish swung round from the wall and pointed her ivory stick at Nigel like a rapier. Her voice now had an incisiveness that brought him upright in his chair. I wish you to find out what is wrong. I wish you to find out what Dr. Bogan is doing in that house. I reckon him to be an objectionable creature. And what Hereward Restorick is afraid of. And what was in Andrew Restorick's heart that night when he paid no attention to the cat, but was staring so fixedly at one other person in the room. And I wish, she added, in a whisper that Nigel only just caught, You may save Elizabeth from damnation.
She returned to her chair and gazed expectantly at Nigel. They're all there still, the house party?
They come and go, but at present they are all at the manor and like to stay. The roads in winter are very dirty.
But, you know, Nigel pointed out gently, I have no authority to...
I have arranged for that. There is, I understand, a society for psychical research. You are to be a member of it. I have asked you to stay with me so that you may investigate the incident of the cat in the bishop's room. It is all arranged.
But I don't know the first thing about psychical research.
I have purchased some volumes on the subject from my bookshop. You will study them tomorrow, and in the evening we are invited to take dinner at the manor.
Nigel gasped a little at Miss Cavendish's high-handedness. He would have liked to feel more sceptical about the extraordinary statements she had made, but, against his will, he had been impressed. Moreover, she had inspired him with a strong curiosity, an impatient desire to fill in the shadowy outlines of the characters she had described. What is this Dr. Bogan a doctor of? He asked.
Medicine, I dare say. I hope I may not have to take any of his medicines.
Who invited him? Do you know?
Elizabeth brings many unsuitable persons to stay at the manor.
She comes down quite often herself, then?
Yes, she is a sadly erratic girl, I fear, but Hereward can scarcely forbid her the house.
Miss Cavendish's replies were not very revealing, thought Nigel. He tried another track. Were any explanations of the cat's behavior offered at the time? Did anyone think of examining the saucer?
I am not to know what the party said of it later. At the time, Hereward took upon himself to break up the assembly. He is the sort of man that chooses to ignore what he cannot understand. He would pile on 100 mattresses rather than search for the pea. I do not know whether the saucer was examined.
You say that Dr. Bogan and Elizabeth Resterick put their heads together after the incident. Did you hear anything they said?
Nothing material, I am sure. I am a little deaf, but adept in lip reading. I fancied Dr. Bogan said to Elizabeth, "Stick it, E," but I was not paying them much attention. And now, my dears, we have had an exhausting day. You will forgive me if I retire. If you desire a dish of chocolate before retiring, pray ring for Annie. I am happy to have you both in my house.
With remarkable dignity, the old lady rose, kissed Georgia, offered Nigel her frail, jeweled fingers, and took herself and her ivory stick up to bed. Chapter 4. O'er all there hung a shadow and a fear. Thomas Hood. Easterham Manor, as they emerged next evening from the car which Hereward Resterick had sent to fetch them, was no more than a blacker bulk against the blackness of the night. Nigel had to take Clarissa Cavendish's word for it that the house had been built in Queen Elizabeth's reign, and little altered since. The Virgin Queen and her subjects, he reflected, never suffered from such a blackout. The car drove off, the chains round its tires clinking, a faint fume of snow marking the course of the invisible wheels. The front door opened. Easterham Manor was evidently the kind of house where the front door opened without your having to ring the bell. There'll be a slap-up dinner. Nigel squeezed Georgia's arm as they scurried inside, and the butler closed the door quickly behind them.
A maidservant led Georgia and Miss Cavendish upstairs to take off their wraps. For Miss Cavendish, this would be a formidable undertaking, since, in spite of their host's solicitude in sending a car and the shortness of the journey from door to door, she had sucked herself up as if for an Arctic expedition, putting on a bonnet, a fur coat, and a leather golf jacket over her party dress, and 6 or 7 petticoats, to judge by her Mrs. Noah-like figure beneath it. While the disrobing was going forward, Nigel had leisure to observe the hall in which he had been left. It was big enough to have been set down in the World Fair and create a sizable obstruction there. It was warm as toast. American wife, central heating, plenty of cash, said Nigel to himself, but otherwise almost overpoweringly Elizabethan, with its great oaken and cedar chests, rush mats, iron flambeaux, and coats of arms upon the walls, the kind of hall that Charlotte Restorick would probably have described as just too cute. Yes, she certainly would, thought Nigel a few moments later, when Mrs. Restorick, superbly gowned in gold lame, swam forward to meet them. He had the utmost difficulty in not addressing her as Mrs. Rittenhouse, for she resembled to the life distinctly arch, sorely put upon hostess of animal crackers. So nice to have you here, Clarissa, she boomed in a voice like a stag belling. And this is the famous Georgia Strangeways. Hereward, haven't I always said I was dying to meet Mrs. Strangeways? Hereward Restorick assented in a well-bred mumble, pulling at the ends of his moustache. Pleasure, he was understood to say. Distinguished woman, read your novels? Oh, how provoking men are, exclaimed his wife archly. Mrs. Strangeways is not a novelist, Hereward. She's the explorer, you know. Welcome to Eastern Manor, Mr. Strangeways. I think psychical research is just too cute.
Oh, it's just so cute!
Now, Mrs. Strangeways, I want to have you
Sorry, I couldn't resist.
Mr. Dykes. Will Dykes, you know.
That
Authoritarian novelist.
is
I'm sure
so cute!
Clever people. Eunice, this is Mr. Strangeways, who is going to find out all about our ghost for us.
Our ghost!
Miss Ainsley.
I love the voices in
the
this.
note of a gong, hardly less portentous than Big Ben, was heard, vying not altogether successfully with Mrs. Restorick's bell-like tones. 2 men came into the room, one slim, bronze, with a light athletic tread, the other sallow, stooping, and bearded. They were introduced as Andrew Restorick and Dr. Dennis Bogan. It was at this moment that, amid the confused bubble of conversation, Clarissa's voice sounded like a tinkling icicle. Where is Elizabeth? She said. Is she not to be with us? The effect of this innocuous question was quite extraordinary. It created a momentary silence, which set all Nigel's nerves tingling, as though Clarissa had made some unforgivable accusation. He noticed several of the party glancing covertly at each other, as if to estimate the effect of Miss Cavendish's question upon their neighbours. Everything, for an instant, seemed frozen into the helpless unreality of a nightmare. Then their hostess said, So sorry, Elizabeth is not well. She's had one of her attacks and won't be able to come down tonight. So disappointing for her. How is she, Dr. Bogan? The pulse is still a little high, but I hope we shall be able to get her up tomorrow. The doctor's voice was smooth as oil upon troubled waters. By rights, it should have put an end to the odd little situation, but Clarissa Cavendish said, Too many cocktails. You should forbid them to her. They undermine the system. It was an outrageous remark, and doubly so coming from Miss Cavendish, thought Nigel, who was normally so very much the mistress of ceremony. Its reception, however, showed that she was more intimate with the household than he had realized. It seemed to relax the tension rather than increase it, though Nigel felt it had been quite out of character. Several of those in the room laughed indulgently, and Andrew Restorick said, "Miss Cavendish, you're incorrigible. I believe you would rather see us all under the table with sherry or claret than sipping one tiny glass of watered-down gin and Angostura." "In my day," replied the old lady briskly, "gin was drank only by the low. A penny a quartern, drunk for a penny, dead drunk for twopence was the saying." Once again, Nigel's scalp crawled. It was uncanny that "in my day," referring to a time 200 years back, a century from which Clarissa Cavendish, sitting bolt upright in her flowered dress and aura of elaborate courtliness, might have been a revenant. "A penny a quartern!" exclaimed Miss Ainsley. "Those were the days. But I thought it was loaves you sold by the quartern." Miss Cavendish surveyed the flushed, jerky young woman through her lorgnette with considerable disdain, but offered no reply. Will Dykes muttered audibly, "Anyone would think Betty was a dipsomaniac the way some people talk." "Really, Dykes," protested Hereward Restorick, massaging his moustache even more vigorously, "I'm not aware that anyone suggested." "Oh no, we're not suggesting anything. We're just sitting round being polite ladies and gentlemen, pretending not to notice the bad smell in the room."
And that there is where I'm going to end the audiobook. And I think because we've hit our hour of drawing, we are finished. I would possibly like to go a bit further, but I think if I put too much in this picture, it's going to start looking cluttered and it's going to look overdeveloped. And when it starts doing that, it just looks crap. It started out really bad. I don't know what you think of it. I mean, I'm not super proud of it, but it's not bad for something that's just popped out of my head. So yeah. If you guys have enjoyed it, please leave a like. If you want to see some more tomorrow, don't forget to hit subscribe and ding the bell for notifications on when I'll be going live again tomorrow for some more artwork, as it is Inktober and I'll be doing this every single day, and I have been. Don't forget to check out the playlist of Inktober to see all the other references and all the pictures that I've created with them. Otherwise, thanks for watching. My name has been and will always be Blut084. BLUT084 Art and Games. I'm here every single day on YouTube, occasionally on Mixer, where I do some gaming, and also over on Instagram, where you can chat to me every day and night. If you want to see anything else, click the links that will appear. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.